Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending on what time of the world you are watching this from. Hello, and welcome back to A Walk on the Geek Side. I'm Maddie. I'm here with my buddy Skep
Hey, everybody.
and the ever lovable Sage.
Hello, everyone.
We're continuing our Silmarillion talk because last week we gave some teasers as to Melkor and Sauron and Balrogs and such, and now we're moving on to the creation of other things.
Yep. Well, let's get going then.
Okie dokie.
One thing I want to talk about. Yeah, start. Go.
Just looking to you to take the lead on this, so.
Yeah.
Like you did.
One thing I want to mention really quite quickly, by the way. We'll get back to that just for when people, come in later, so to speak. As much as people will come in later. But one thing I feel we do need to talk about is that we have been talking about the age of the lamps and the age of darkness before that. Mm-hmm. And it's worth mentioning that time at that point was a bit nebulous. At this point, after the creation of the trees, where we ended last time, we are actually getting something that could be called recorded history. Even though actual history would, of course, have to wait a little while until the elves arrived. But when we're talking about the age of the trees or the years of the trees, because the trees were the light of the world, so they're what we're counting for, it's worth remembering that a year in the year of the trees are actually, as to us, 10 years of the sun. Not that time went any faster or anything, it's just that the way the Valar immortals, after all, counted their time was longer. So when we're talking about a year of the trees, we're talking specifically about 1,000 years, sun years, as we would understand them. So, anyway, let's get going. Melkor, the great evil Valar, or at least the great fallen Valar, is ruling most of the world. As much as he is ruling, because there's really not much there to rule. It's a dark wasteland. Nothing is growing. Nothing is... Remember, Melkor is not like Sauron. Melkor, at this point... I don't think Melkor at this point has fallen quite to the level he did later. We've already mentioned that Melkor's primary purpose is basically to control Middle-earth, and recreate it as it suited him, or destroy it if he couldn't, while as Sauron was to order it and structure it like he desired. Also, that, of course, had something to do with relevant power levels, as Sauron, even at his greatest, could not hope to destroy the world, while Melkor might actually have a shot at that.
Yeah.
It would be difficult, but he would have a shot at that. But Melkor is ruling the outer world, basically anywhere but the Valar's home country, now adopted country of Valinor. But there isn't really anything there. There is him, and there is his Maya spirits, and that's it. And they are walking around doing jack all, because no real trees are growing. There's grass, but it's not really growing, because how can it grow? There's no light, there's no sun, there's nothing to give it, energy. Mm-hmm. So Melkor is sitting out there, but really, despite having control of most of the world for quite a while, the only thing he really does is build himself a second fortress in the same damn mountain range where he has his first one. We shall remember that he had his great fortress of Utumno, Udun, as the elves would call it. The same name was later used for the great volcanic, really gigantic volcanic caldera that occupied most of northern Mordor, and it basically has come to mean hell. I mean, Udun or Utumno in Middle-earth would be what we refer to as hell, the home and dominion of Satan, because that is basically what Melkor is to this world.
Yeah. We also had a stronghold in Angband, right?
Yeah, that's the second fort, but he also knows that eventually, the Valar might discover where he is and come against him.
Right.
So he has already had to retreat before Tulkas, so he knows that he can be defeated if possible. So he builds another fortress to further west towards where Valinor is, called Angband.
Right.
And this is actually the first time we hear about individual servants of him, because in Angband he places as the governor or the military commander Sauron. So this is the first time we hear about Sauron in the early years, in the Ages of Darkness out in the world, but in the early years of the trees, where he is placed as, he is Melkor's chief servant and commander of the outpost of Angband. However, something needs to happen. And eventually, of course, the Valar knows that the children are going to show up. They don't know when, but they look forward to seeing them, the children of the world, the children of Eru. And Aule, displaying his usual good sense of timing and leadership potential, decides that I want to do something too, because the children are not coming. I really want someone that I can... he does it from good intentions.
Yeah.
I want someone I can teach. I want someone I can instruct, someone who can be my children, help me in my task that I can help grow, and so on. So he creates from earth and metal a
the seven fathers of the dwarves.
The prototype of the dwarfs, the original seven fathers.
Right.
Unfortunately for him, Eru is aware of this, because of course he is. He is God, out of God. So he basically comes to Aule and says, what's all this then?
Right.
Oi, what's all this then?
Yeah.
You got a permit for those dwarves?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you did not fill in Form 55D to allow the creation of sentient races. And of course, Aule eventually says, "Oh, God damn it, you're right. I'm sorry, Dad. This was wrong of me. I'm just so impatient. You showed us this vision of the children, and I just want someone to help, to instruct, to make grow, to become, an adult race of their own." But no,
this is still in the ages of darkness, though.
No, this is the Age of Trees. The trees have been created at this point, because that's when...
No, when he fashions the seven fathers of the dwarves, that's actually during the ages of darkness.
No, it can't be, because it's in Valinor, and the trees grow as soon as Valinor is founded.
Mm-hmm.
No.
I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so. I think I'm pretty sure that
Yavanna sang and danced the trees into existence before Aule said, "Ha! I need dwarves."
I thought he fashioned the seven fathers of dwarves during the Age of Darkness, when Melkor and his servants in Autumno and Angband, for that matter, were dominating Middle Earth. I thought that was still...
Okay, hang on. Chapter 2 of Aule and Yavanna. Dwarves were made by Aule in the darkness of Middle Earth. So greatly did Aule desire the coming of the children to have learners to whom he could teach. That doesn't mean that it was the age of darkness blanketed, because there wasn't darkness in Valinor. This was after.
It can be the Age of Darkness, it can be the Age of the Trees. It doesn't really particularly matter. He does it anyway. Yeah. In the general timeline, it has to be around here somewhere, because it's before the ages of stars, at least.
Yeah.
Anyway, Aule does this, and he is ready to destroy them on behalf of Eru, especially since he realizes that Eru is right. He hasn't actually created a sentient race. The dwarves at this point is actually incredibly interesting, because they are, to a certain degree, at least, like I said, in degree, what Tolkien later described Melkor and especially Sauron's orcs as they are only filled with intelligence, will, and life when his attention is on them. When his attentions are on them, they are basically like a normal creature, like dwarves, as you would expect. When his attention turns away from them, they lose all their life. They're basically, dolls of clay and earth. Which is why Aule realizes that, I've gone too far. This is not something I'm capable of. I fucked up. So he is ready to destroy. What?
Just the idea of saying Aule saying, I fucked up.
Well, basically, right?
It's just wonderful.
In the ancient colloquial.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just found that particularly interesting because it's worth noticing that it's basically this is probably where Sauron got the idea from. To be completely honest,
to mangle the elves into orcs.
Yeah, well, or something like that, or basically what he did what Sauron later did with the orcs. We know from the end of the Lord of the Rings that the orcs, when Sauron is killed or destroyed or diminished, or when Sauron is defeated, the ring goes into the fire. We know that the orcs basically stop existing as a driven sentient race. They start turning on each other, slaughtering each other, just running away mindlessly or standing around in catatonic while the armies of the West are slaughtering them. So I just wonder, I just always found that the orcs are definitely a sentient race.
Oh, yeah.
They are a physical sentient race upon the world. At this point, the dwarves are not, but I found the analogy really interesting. I wonder if I do wonder if Aule later, watching the events of the War of the Rings from afar, gets some flashbacks to his earliest experiences with the dwarves when Eru comes to smack him down. Again, it's not important. It's never mentioned in the story. It's just something I've always found somewhat interesting. Anyhow, Aule is ready to destroy them. So he raises his giant hammer. Remember, the Valar can achieve any shape they want, so he's probably in giant shape this time. Raises his giant hammer to smite and destroy his creation, but the dwarfs are huddling in fear and begging for mercy. And this, of course, should not be possible, since they are really just extensions of his will at this point, except that Eru has said, okay, I know you did this for good reasons. You didn't do this to, rebel against me.
Yeah.
You didn't do this out of pride. You did this out of a perhaps misguided eagerness to do exactly what I wanted you to do, so I'm giving your creations life. I'm giving them room and space and a place in the song, in my world, in the creation.
And we're going to fix your mistakes.
Now, they are not allowed to become anything until my children are there.
They can't precede the elves.
The
elves were always
can't
be the firstborn.
Yeah, they can't be the firstborn because I already have those, but I will take your thing. But you can have them, take them, place them in different places, and when the time is right, they will arise as a separate race. And if you really... the point is, this happens. That's how the dwarves come into being. This is why the dwarves are quite different from literally every other creature around. And also, I find it really interesting because Aule and Melkor is in many ways, despite Melkor being, sharing the gifts of everyone, Aule and Melkor are in many ways the mirror images of each other. Mm-hmm. Melkor is the one who wants to create things so they can worship him and he can control them. Not even rule them, literally control them. Aule is the one who is truly, a craftsman, an artist, if you will. Someone who wants to create for the sake of creation.
He wants to create something he can love.
Yeah, or
That's
something
exactly the opposite of Morgoth. Or
something he can take pride in because of the quality of the work rather than what it can give him.
Right.
So to speak. However, at this point, the dwarves are allowed to be there. So Aule decides to take them, put them in pairs at different points around the world, 3 pairs around the world, except for one who's being placed alone at one of the great mountain ranges of Middle-earth. We'll get back to the dwarves a bit later.
Yep.
However, this is not the end of this time's creation, because you will remember that Aule was married to Yavanna, the Earth Mother. And she is not too pleased about this whole thing, because, of course, her main interests are the flora and fauna. And she can especially see that a race of blacksmiths are perhaps not going to be very good for her trees.
Right.
Not great trees, but just trees in general. So she gets pissy. And Eru, being the high outer true god, realizes that, woman scorned and all that, decides, okay, you can get something too. I will give you one thing of the same sort of caliber. Now, you can get a sentient species, if you will, of animals or of flora. And Yavanna is, well, animals can either fight or flee. I mean, animals are what... Oh dear. Animals are what you would call, living... I mean, everything is living beings. They can fight, they can flee, they can escape, they can get out of bad situations in various ways, while trees, flowers, and so on are basically stuck where they are, unless they happen to be a banana tree. But Tolkien didn't write too much about bananas.
No.
So she wants someone to protect and help the flora of the world, and okay, says Eru, you get the Ents.
Yep.
They are not going to be the firstborn either, but as the dwarves will awaken, so will your tree protectors. And Yavanna then goes to Aule and says, nah, look what I got. Now your children has to think twice about, harvesting my children for firework, at which point Aule basically, they're going to need firewood anyway, and keeps on smithing. That's literally the quote from the book. I just love that whole interaction there. I don't know why it appeals to...
It was history's first meh.
Yeah, basically. We're going to need... my children are going to need fireworks anyway, so we'll see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the year of the trees goes on. About 1,000 of them, which means about 10,000 years. 10,000 sun years, but I mean, who cares? There's really only Maya and Valar around, and some sleeping dwarfs and Ents somewhere who isn't around.
Yeah,
but then
the 7 fathers of dwarves slept for many ages before the stars were rekindled and the time of awakening drew near.
Yeah. Now, there had always been stars in the night of Middle. Okay, one thing I need to clarify. We talked about it last time, but I actually found a better explanation. I talked about last time how the world was basically divided into Ea and Ada. Ea is sort of all of creation, all of physical creation within the great nothingness where the Ainu originally lived, and Ada is the actual physical world. What you can compare it with is that Ada is planet Earth, and Ea is the rest of the universe.
Yeah.
Now, the universe at this point is probably not particularly big, or at least not particularly relevant in the greater majority whole. But as a general rule, Ea is all of physical creation, all of the universe, while Ada is this little globe. Well, at this point, actually, this little flat flat world that we're all living on. But there has always been stars, but they are weak and not particularly enlightening, especially outside of Valinor where there isn't the trees. But at this point, the Valar, especially the top Valar, that is Manwë and his wife, gets to realize that the time of the elves are approaching. Now, remember, they don't know what the elves are, except as a general sort of, they are the children of Ilúvatar mentioned in the song. But, I mean, they haven't actually seen them. The idea that the Valar saw all of the world in a vision, I think, needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. I don't think they actually got, like, a physical view of what's going on. It's more like this is what the song is going to be in a physical aspect of it. But the top Valar, especially Vardar and Manwë, realizes the time grows nigh where the elves shall awake, and we still kind of have Melkor sitting around out there controlling everything and messing with us. Well, we're going to warn him. So Vardar takes dew from the trees. Dew from the trees are falling into great pools that also has light, because of course it is, which helps lighten up the whole thing. So she takes dew from that, and out of that dew she fashions stars. The great stars. This is why she is called the Star Lady, Elbereth in Elvish, literally Lady of the Stars.
It's Queen of the Stars.
Queen of the Stars. She creates the great stars, scatter them across the sky, and particularly in the northern hemisphere, so to speak, in the north of the star heaven, she puts the sickle of the Valar.
Right.
A great star sign as a warning and a challenge to Melkor, who in fear and worry retreats with his forces into his strongholds for a while. The sickle of... Yeah, go.
Even before Melkor first began to create his discordant vision, Varda knew his mind well.
Yeah, she did not like him.
She rejected him and was always his enemy from that moment. As a result of that, Melkor hated Varda right back, and probably hated her worst of all the Valar, and feared her more than the others whom Eru had created. If you think about it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he didn't like her, and she didn't like him, and now she... the sickle of the Valar, by the way, is basically the Big Dipper.
Yes, exactly.
It's basically the Big Dipper, but it's the sickle of the Valar, the challenge to Melkor, who for a while withdraws to his strongholds. What is interesting is that at the exact same moment, the new great stars are set in the sky to lighten up the night in outer Middle-earth. Eru awakens the elves. The Quendi, as they would later become known. Yeah. The first people. So the elves are now up and about. They are more specifically awakened in the sort of lightly forested areas near the inland bay of Kuivinen, or Kuivienen, a great bay on the inland sea of Helkar in the furthest northeast of Middle-earth. Now, Tolkien wrote a couple of stories about how of the very earliest days of the elves, but some of them are contradicting each other. Some of them has to do with elves we never hear from or see again. So I don't think we need to go into too much details with them. But the point is that over the next couple of years of the trees, i.e. decades and a couple of centuries, the elves are awakened in the northeast of Middle-earth and starts to spread. And of course, as Treebeard would later recall, elves love to talk. So this is also when, for instance, the Ents starts waking up, because elves starts talking to the trees until finally some of them talk back. The elves develop speech. They develop... basically everything we consider to be mainstays of sapient races are developed, invented, and made into an art form by the elves at this point as they spread out across the woodlands of northeastern Middle-earth. They are still basically at this point a hunter-gathering organization. They don't know how to smelt metal. They probably can create bows and arrows, but most of the, considering we're dealing with elves here, most of the times they would probably only eat, self-dead animals and then mostly be vegetarians. But the elves are now there. Another thing that happens at this point is that a couple of interesting Maya decides, okay, things are going to happen in Middle-earth, and with the new stars, it's going to be beautiful there. We want to see it. So they abandon Valinor, not for good. They can't really be for good, but for the time being, the most important of these are Melian, one of the more powerful of the Maya, of the female Maya spirits, and she lives in the forest of Nan Elmoth. Nan Elmoth will be important later, but keep that name in mind, Melian.
Yeah.
She's going to be... I think I mentioned it last time. I think I mentioned how the trees were probably the single most important MacGuffin in the Middle-earth mythos, if you want to call it that, Middle-earth legendarium, because apart from the dwarfs, basically everything is related to the trees in degree one way or the other. Now, if we're talking about individuals in question, on the side of the free people, on the side of goodness, Melian is probably the same. The single most important being of early Middle-earth.
She certainly has a lot of press time, airtime.
Yeah, and her influence with her family and her actions are going to be exceedingly important.
I mean, this was a singular event for a Meyer to marry.
Yeah. We're not there. We're not there yet. I wanted to.
I know.
But...
I'm just saying that that's going to be a person of importance.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Go back to it.
She is going to. She's going to be very, very important through her marriage, through her family, through her actions, and especially through her ability to confound Melkor whenever he messes up. But anyway. It's also probably around this time that the dwarfs are again first awakened. The earliest dwarfs would not be immortal because the only real immortal creatures, aside from the Ainur spirits, would be the elves. But the earliest dwarfs must have been unspeakably long-lived.
Long-lived, yeah.
There is some indication that they were probably even partially immortal until the sun rose later.
Yeah, but names like Durin the Deathless.
Yeah. I mean, Durin must have been going on for more than 10,000 years.
Yes, exactly.
While dwarves later, of course, could live for about 350, 400 at the very most.
Right, exactly.
At the very, very, very most. But anyway, the dwarves are awakened at this point and start wandering. Eventually, of course, Durin will find the nameless pool and the caverns above the Dimril Dale and found Khazad-dûm.
Yep.
Other dwarves will find will start other colonies, of which the two most important will be Nogrod and Belegost.
Again, Nogrod and Belegost in the Blue Mountains, right?
Yeah. They are not exceedingly important yet, but as we get into the meat of the Silmarillion, they will be there.
Yeah.
Belegost, when the world has been overthrown, the world has changed, continents have sunk and shifted. A small amount of Belegost might actually still be around. because there could be some arguments that this was actually where Thorin's halls in the Blue Mountains was, or at least near that.
It sort of depends where in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah, but anyway, so the creatures have started to awake and begun to spread out, at least somewhat still either alone, like the dwarves, or the Ents have started to wake up and move about. And the again, this is the power of the gods at this point, or the archangels, the Valar. Things are starting to grow under the starlight. Now, theoretically, I suppose, things could grow only under starlight, but of course, we need like a powerful god like Ero to prevent the world from freezing to goddamn ice ball without the sun to warm it. Right. But things are but this is fantasy, so such things can happen. Yep. So things are starting to grow under the stars. However, as the centuries, maybe even the first millennia pass after the awakening of the elves, Melkor sees that, okay, he's not under any immediate onslaught, so his people start leaving Utumno again. And some of them captures elves and brings them back to Melkor, to Utumno. And he sees the beauty and glory and innocent, like the pure innocent. You have to remember, for Tolkien, elves were basically humans unfallen. We're going straight into Catholic theology here.
Yeah, elves were Adam and Eve.
Yeah, elves are what humans would be if someone hadn't chewed down on a Granny Smith.
Yep.
Basically. Yes, I know. It probably, the forbidden fruit probably wasn't an apple. Blah 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 blah. But those are elves. So imagine like this most pure creature of, he sees the creationist fire, if you will, in their very existence, and he gets them in front of him, and you can imagine this pisses him off. And no one knows exactly what happens at this point. All we know is that Melkor starts sending creatures to poach elves from whenever they find them. In fact, elves are not really afraid, because it's not like he is taking half the population, but individual elves disappear here and again from evil creatures in the night, and very soon after that, the first orcs arrive. Now, Tolkien himself went back and forth over the years of the origins of the orcs, but since he never settled on anything, I think for sure, before he died, I think we can all agree to stick to the idea that the original orcs were basically tortured and corrupted elves. That's what it's like in the Silmarillion at any rate. And even if he in his later writings went back and forth on it a couple of times, as a general rule, orcs as the race originally rose was basically corrupted, tortured elves from the early years of the trees and the stars.
Yep. That's what I understand also.
Yeah, I mean, he went back on it here and there.
I know. There's some ambiguity in the later writings, but the early stuff seems to. I go by what he wrote originally. So
no, I actually like the idea that they are tortured and perverted elves. To be completely honest, because it just suits Melkor. It just suits Melkor so very, very well to do that.
Yes.
Later on, it's mirrored in the Lord of the Rings book when Saruman does the same thing to make the Uruk-hai.
Yeah, we're mixing them with human stock. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Anywho, so now we are starting to get somewhere. The elves have awakened as hunter-gatherers over in the northeast. Melkor, I keep doing that. Okay, his later name is Morgoth. We'll get to why he's called that, but so far it's Melkor. He is starting to spread out slowly again from his fortresses and started kidnapping elves, torturing them, turning them into orcs, a miserable slave race, because that's what he would like. a miserable slave race to mock and spite God himself. Again, this is basically him repeating. I mean, the thing is, it sounds like this is basically him repeating his actions from the great music where he sowed discord. But at the same time, him sowing discord in the great music is literally what's happening now.
Yep.
This is something that people so often forget. Melkor sowing discord in the original music was basically the creation of the orcs. That he then later actually went on to do. His, creating ice and poisoning wetlands into swamps and so on. It's all part of the original discord, and now that the world is here, he has a chance to do it. But
all the while he was seeking the imperishable?
The flame imperishable. That's all he ever wanted. He wants the flame imperishable so he can create a world of his own.
Right.
And because he's been corrupted, it would not be a very nice world, but he's constantly either seeking the flame imperishable or seeking to, how to put it?
Corrupt air.
Yeah, corrupt was already there to spite his brethren and daddy. If there's anyone, I mean, there is a lot of daddy issues in the Legendarium, but if anyone is a maladjusted teenager, it's basically Melkor.
Yeah, he's the rebel without a clue.
Yeah.
Anyway, the guy who says, I know.
Yeah. There's one thing we need to discuss here before we go on with the story, and this is one of those things that I actually really love about Tolkien. It's just such a small thing, but it's just, again, it says something about the details he uses in his writing. We've gone over this before.
What is it?
In The Lord of the Rings, you will notice that Goldenberry, during the time in Tom Bombadil's house, is speaking about the ancient darkness before it was fearful, before the coming of the great enemy. She is actually referring specifically to this time. Goldberry is probably one of the Maya, very, very lesser Maya, who came to Middle-earth with...
That's exactly my theory.
With Melian.
I have been laughed at by people when I said that Goldberry was probably Maya, and was just kind of, she wasn't like Gandalf or anything, but she had some... There was magic in her. It's one of the evident to me, and I actually think that Bombadil might have been a very special Maya.
I don't think so. I still think he's basically the genuine loci for the world.
Really?
Yeah, that's we discussed that in that particular stream, and I will stick to that. But that's a discussion. Write that down, because when we're done with the Silmarillion, we can take some of these discussions in a stream. Yeah. Let's not get too far. Let's not get too sidetracked.
You can be responsible for scribing. How about that?
Yeah.
Let me get a pen. Put it in the future show map that we
future possible show map when we're done with everything else. Various discussions we can take.
Right.
But
I had to think long and hard about whether or not I thought he was Maya, and it's so hard to classify. It's so hard to classify him because the information you have about him is so enigmatic.
Completely, and this, of course, was Tolkien's purpose. There has to be some mysteries. When he was asked what Tom Bombadil is or who he was, his comment was, "Well, he is Tom Bombadil. There has to be some mysteries in any mythos." Yeah. But in my opinion, he's the genuine loci of Middle-earth. But to get back to the point, Goldberry mentions the dark, walking in the darkness of the world before it was fearful, before the coming of the great enemy. She's talking about this specific moment, whether she's talking about the original entry of Melkor into the world, or she's talking about when he returned from Valinor later, or whatever. It's up for debate, but the point is, for the elves, and probably for the Ents and others that assisted at this point, darkness is not bad or evil. This is why elves prefer night, because they awoke to eternal starlight. There wasn't day or night. They were way too far and behind too many mountain ranges to see the light of the trees, even just on the horizon. All they had was these very clear stars shining down upon clear still water, or clear, calm water. So, actually, in Elvish, that Tolkien created, there are different words from darkness, meaning dark of night, and darkness meaning evil darkness, or darkness that is evil and fearful, which I kind of like. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just one of those things where I really love Tolkien's attention to detail.
Yeah.
So the elves are the creatures of starlight, the children of starlight. That's what Quendi basically means. People of the stars. Yeah. That's what the elves originally called themselves, and we are going to, in a very short time, that's going to be the second half of today's show, or the last third, we're going to go into a very long discussion about the various subspecies of elves, because people do need to know about it.
Yep.
If they're going to follow along on this one.
So if you don't know how to tell a Sindar from a Noldor,
you're screwed.
Stand by and learn.
We are going to help you with that.
Otherwise known as, if you have never played the tabletop game Middle-earth role-playing, we're about to educate y'all.
Yeah. But the point I wanted to make before we move on here is, again, the elves are creatures of starlight, and they were born before there was sun and moon, where there was only this eternal starlight. But Tolkien associates evil with darkness quite a lot. So I just love that he's not a lot. Some others, I'm not saying that he was unique in any way, but not a lot of other authors would be that focused on making a coherent whole within his details, that in his invented language, he would make different words from dark referring to just darkness as it is, like darkness of under the stars or darkness of the night, and darkness as in darkness that is evil, darkness that is fearful, darkness that has its wellspring in Satan rather than a natural state of being.
Yeah.
Again, not super relevant perhaps for the Silmarillion, but you guys know that I love tooting Tolkien's horn whenever possible.
Well, it shows his love for linguistics and his attention to detail, right down to the smallest of details that most people wouldn't think of.
Yeah. Anyway, so where were we? Oh yes, everyone has awoken. Melkor has started kidnapping some of the elves, twisting them into orcs. The Ents have started walking around. Dwarves has arisen and are looking for places to settle down and start carving out their kingdoms, etc., etc. Mm-hmm. And Orome, you might remember him from last time as the Veiler of the Hunt.
Yep.
Now, he's basically the Apollon. Like I said last time, he's basically like a mix of Hermes and Apollon. Apollo in many ways in Greek mythology. Actually, I think Hermes was Roman, but the
Mercury.
No,
Hermes was Greek. Mercury was the Roman.
Oh, was it that way around? Yeah, sorry. I'm best with Northern mythology, I freely admit.
Yay, somebody else that gets the Romans and the Greek gods screwed up, because just different
I don't
names.
get them mixed up, because I'm actually pretty good with Greek and Roman, so I can help you out there.
That's good. You're a resident expert in this.
There you go.
What I wanted to say now was that Orome has this tendency to not just stay out in Valinor. As one of the only Valar, he goes back to Middle-earth where he hunts either the few creatures who are there with his followers on his great horses, or the creatures of Melkor. Now, it's referred to as the creatures of Melkor, but considering that Melkor at this point should really only have Maya spirits, one would assume that already at this point, which becomes even more pronounced later, some of Melkor's followers would have probably taken, at least the weaker members, would have taken almost permanent physical shape.
Yeah.
The great vampires, or the unnamed thing that gnaws under the misty mountains that Gandalf later refers to. Except how they are older than Sauron, who is older than time itself, is never discussed. But I assume that he means that from Sauron's return to Middle-earth in the beginning of the Second Age, they had been there since forever. That's the only thing that makes logical sense, to be honest.
Yeah.
Unless they had been creatures of Eru's mind before he even created the Great Mirror. Doesn't matter. Orome is out over there hunting in the shadowed and dark woods of Middle-earth, and more Melkor's creatures retreated in front of his horns. And eventually, on one of his horseback rides over there, Orome comes upon the elves, as they live, like I said, in hunter-gatherer tribes at Kuivienen, in the woods around Kuivienen.
Yeah.
And he is immediately... I can imagine this scene from a comedian's perspective, but even more, of course, if you can see greatness in little things, so to speak, you can see this both from a awe-inspiring perspective and from a bit of humor. Because Orome is an archangel, basically a god. Tolkien's differentiating was that the elves understood them because the Valar instructed them directly. So they understood that Eru was the god and they were his first children, so to speak, or the children of his thought. Humans saw them as gods because they didn't understand rightly and they had power enough to appear as such. So basically, for the first time, the elves sees this person, creature, thing, spirit. It's difficult to find a word for it. Upon a horse that was created probably from a Maya spirit who loved having 4 children. I don't know. It's very difficult to see what this is a mythology, so Tolkien is allowed to be a bit vague from time to time, but when all that exists should be Ainur spirits of various calibers, since, Tolkien, they are not allowed to create various creatures on their own, where did horses that Orome had to ride on come from? We know they exist. We know he had cattle as well. Unless, of course, that the answer is that God created non-sapient creatures to live in the world, and it was only the sapient creatures, such as elves, men, and later dwarves, and so on, that were in any way special. This is my personal idea, but no explanation has ever actually been made.
Yeah.
But again, imagine this situation. A god of hunting, the shining god, Apollo on his horse, has been for tens of thousands of years, since he first time heard the song, the great music, has been waiting for the moment where he sees the children, his little brothers and sisters, so to speak, the children of Ilúvatar. The very meaning of his purpose in life is to guide, protect, and help these. And suddenly he's face to face with them, and they are as beautiful as the original elves are. And the elves see a god right in front of them. Imagine the first meeting. The only other creature.
It beggars the imagination. It really
does.
I'm almost struck dumb.
Yeah.
By just the contemplation of it. If you truly love this stuff, if this truly gets you where you live, you this kind of a moment just nailed.
Yeah.
And see, to me, it's like I'm both awe-inspired, and then at the same time, the little voice in the back of my brain's going, there had to be an elf in the back of the pack going, who's the huge dude that's glowing up there?
I mean, my personal thing is that Orome would say something like, "You must be the children," and some elf, "Louder for those in the back!"
Right?
Oh, whatever. Like I said, I'm a natural comedian when it comes to that sort of stuff. But yeah, again, this is beyond. This seems like
but it's so profound.
It is so profound, and of course, in the actual Silmarillion, it's passed over in like half a sentence. Orome out hunting found the elves,
right?
And was struck with great love for them. Boom! There we go. On with the story.
Yeah. So the next
one. But of course, as with a lot of mythological aspects, not just in Tolkien, but just mythology in general, it is the implications of event that is so mind-blowing rather than necessarily the event itself.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, Orome is like, okay, this is awesome. I'm just going to teach you a couple of things here because, I'm going to tell you some stuff and teach you a few skills, and then I really need to get back home and talk to my boss because there's some stuff he needs to know. Now, whether or not Manve or Vada realized that the elves had awoken is never...
It's not treated at all.
It's never treated at all. I would assume, based upon the story, that they did not know. I think it would make more sense if they knew that the time must be around now, so they were perhaps not immensely surprised that it would happen.
That's where I come down on it, is they know what the plan is.
They're
aware of the plan, and they're aware of the time. And so they know that the time of the elves is just about at hand.
But they don't know...
You never see it told,
No. I mean, I don't actually think Manve knew, because then he would have sent someone over there rather than Orome basically stumbling on them.
Yeah.
But
once again, the Legendarium is silent on it.
But I would assume that it's like it has to be any day now. But I don't actually know anything for certain. Also, how much can Manve actually see, and how much is he reliant on agents like his eagles relaying information back to him?
They are his messengers. Are they? They're less scouts than messengers.
Yeah, but again, what are they at this point? How much is he actually focused on the outer world at the same time at this point? Or how much is he as much focused on rebuilding Valinor?
What is he doing?
Yeah. So the point is, Orome meets the elves, and he is something in the style of, okay, let's have a chat. And they have a big chat, and the elves probably mentions that, everything is fine. We're doing well here, but sometimes some of our people are going missing, and some areas are like, it feels really fearful to go into that dark patch of woods there, and sometimes people are vanishing from there and we don't really know what's going on, but it's not a big thing. And Orome at this point is probably like, God damn that annoying little turd waffle up in the northern mountains.
Turd waffle. Sorry.
So anyway, after Orome spent some time with them, how long is never described. Basically, it would probably have to be a few years of the sun, what we would call a few years of the sun. I've always assumed that he stayed with them for about a year of the tree, about what we would call 10 years, guiding them, teaching them, instructing them, learning the fact that something like this happened when someone was disappearing, that there was actually fear. But eventually he realizes that he has to leave them where they are and go home and tell the rest of the Valar about this thing. Mm-hmm. And so he does. Skep, are you still around, or are you dealing with a puppy?
No, I'm still listening.
Okay, good. I just heard someone bark in the background.
That was Ruby Sue giving.
Oh, that was Ruby. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. No.
Okay. Anyway,
I've got the dachshund tucked into the blanket here with me.
So this is where one of the most important discussions of all of Middle Earth or all of Arda, all of Lord of the Rings universe takes place. Namely, the Valar has to decide what to do about this. There will be another one in a very short time that will be even more important, where they, to a certain degree, might even be set to make the wrong decision. Personally, I think that decision was more or less taken from them in the great music, so I don't know how much choice they have. But later, it could well be said the Valar made a decision. But as of right now, Orome goes home, tells all of the others all about what he has seen and what is going on out there, and how awesome the elves are, and the children are here. And again, Tolkien never meant... We've been through this when we ranted about The Hobbit. Tolkien never discusses telepathy within his Lord of the Rings universe, or within his Legendarium. But one would have to assume that the Valar, at least, or the Ainur, to a certain degree might be able to share stuff like sensory visions, or Orome could create illusions of the elves that the others could see and understand, and so on. And he also informs them that Melkor knows that they're there. And this is then when the Valar decides, okay, we have been sitting behind our mountain range for too long. We cannot let, older drug-addled brother in and out of prison out there in the northern mountains be the one to take control of the children. That would be everything we are doing here is basically for the sake of these people. We have to do something. So the Valar marshals their armies and go lay siege to Utumno. This is one of those wars that, again, it's a war between the full might of the Valar and the full might of Melkor, and we know absolutely none of it, because apparently the Valar refused to tell the elves about it, and the elves, of course, then couldn't tell the humans about it later. Now, considering how the wars between the Valar and Melkor went, you can imagine quite a bit of geographical catastrophe and upheaval in the world at this point. The major advantage might be that it's confined to the furthest north, because it's basically a siege of Utumno. One would also assume that the Valar put a guard on the elves, that they weren't simply just swallowed up by a giant earthquake while they were up north fighting Melkor. But for quite a while, they were fighting. They were fighting hard. And all the elves knew was basically that the northern skyline were on fire from time to time with various lights, and the earth shook and there were great sounds. And that's all we knew, except for the fact that the Valar eventually won. They beat down the doors of Utumno. They slaughtered, such as it is, literally every creature of Melkor they could get their hands on, except for those who fled or hid in like the very, very deepest pits available to them. And they caught Melkor, bound him with a divine chain smithed by Aule, and dragged him back to Valinor to be judged for his crimes at this point. This is the second of the three great wars between the Valar and Melkor. The first was in the great darkness of, pre-lamps, and it basically created, it smashed the otherwise expected synchronicity of the world. This is the second, and we don't know what it did. It might have been the least damaging, but again, you can basically imagine it as if several gods, as the Greeks and Romans would understand it, or archangels, as we would understand it, went to war with each other at their full might. It had to have been an event, but we just don't know too much about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Valar judged that Melkor should not yet be cast out of the world. They could have called upon Eru and had him cast out of Ea for good, but Melkor humbled himself and apologized and was like, God damn it, I know I'm doing wrong, but if you're just gonna give me one more chance, I promise I'll be good. I'm really sorry, I regret everything. And so on.
No,
And Manve fell for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whether or not Manve fell for it because he was dumb, or he fell for it because he had to fall for it regarding that is how Manve's role was, is unknown. But the point is, Melkor was judged to simply be kept prisoner for 3 ages in the Hall of Mendos from where none have escaped. This is basically like, again, as we talked last time, the Halls of Mendos are difficult to differentiate in a way that modern day theology is, but it's basically the halls of the dead. It's where Mandos live, but it's also where whenever elves die. Okay, we need to do something here. Elves in Middle-earth will never die. When they're disbodied, so to speak, their Fea, or spirit, will go to the Hall of Mandos to rest until it's renewed and been cleansed of whatever crimes it might have committed in life, at which point it will be rehoused in a newly created body for it. Basically the same body. It's always have just newly created and then returned to life. Because that's what Eru said was going to happen.
Which is what a parallel that is to the Christian Bible, where when you were judged worthy of paradise, you were given a perfected body.
Obviously. I mean, Tolkien had his stuff from obvious places. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But this is one of the this is something we'll get back to later, that the Valar cannot, within their own power, kill elves. Their spirit will always live on because Eru have said so it's going to be. So, but nonetheless, if they have committed vile crimes, as someone will, I'm looking at you, Feanor, you asshole.
I was just going to say, what about Feanor?
What the Valar can do is they can delay their return to the body of their lives for any amount of time, including indefinitely, depending on the situation. And this is basically what, in that case, they're basically stuck at Mandos until maybe even the ending of the world for a couple. But we'll get back to that later. In any case, the halls of Mandos you cannot escape from. It's like the will of God. Even Melkor could not escape from there, and he was a powerful boy. But he was judged to live there for 3 ages. When we're talking ages of the trees, i.e. 100 Valian years, i.e. basically 3,000 sun years. Melkor was to remain in captivity within the halls of Mandos. After that, he would be let loose under guard, and if he showed then to have repented and reformed, he would slowly be getting more and more freedom until he was, finally released under his own
They
power.
believed in rehabilitation.
Yeah. So Melkor is out of the picture now. Utumno is destroyed. We actually this is interesting because Utumno is completely destroyed. It's like the greatest stronghold of Melkor at all time. Probably the greatest single stronghold of evil in the Tolkien universe of all time.
Ever built.
And from this moment on, we never hear about it again, except in one secondary case. It's gone. This is how much the Valar was serious about this. They wiped it from the world, basically. Only the ruins of its foundations were still present. However, they didn't destroy Angband.
No.
So Sauron and several of Melkor's forces were still sitting around in Angband, which will be important later, although you can bet your sweet hairy ass they were keeping a very low profile at this time.
You know what Angband translates? Iron prison.
Yeah, Iron Prison, yeah.
Right.
in Elvish. I mean, it probably had another name for Melkor. All of these names are the names in Elvish, because humans know these stories from elves, and it's basically the elven name for everyone. Manvi isn't called Manvi. Manvi is the name that the elves have given to this particular Ainur spirit.
Right.
Melkor.
I just thought it was.
Yeah, no. It's true. It's true, and it will be especially important at a later date, as you know.
Yeah.
Considering what Melkor is going to be doing with it in a little while, so to speak. Anyway, this is now time for the second great debate between the Valar and all of the Ainur spirits, except for those of Melkor, who is imprisoned in Mandos. This is something that's important. When I speak of someone being in Mandos, I'm talking about the halls, the prison, the great halls of Mandos, the house. When I'm talking about Mandos in general, I'm talking about the character. Like I said, this is a bit tricky because it's basically named after the guy himself, or the guy took his name. The guy's name is actually Namo. Sorry, Namo, but he's called Mandos in the rest of the story. So we're going to stick to Mandos for now. But anyway, the Valar held another great discussion, which in this case was about, okay, so the children are here. We have the elves. Probably at this point they had not met the dwarves yet. Presumably the Ents, but not the dwarves. But the elves are here. What do we do with them? There were two parts of the discussion. There was, do we leave them out there? Do we just basically leave the outer world to them, Middle-earth, allow them to spread out, do with the world as they see fit, leave them out there to their own development while keeping watch over them and giving them such support as absolutely necessary, or because they are awesome and we love them and we want to have them near us because they are awesome and we love them, do we bring them here to Valinor? And this is one of those situations where there can be a very, very, very good discussion about whether or not the Valar failed, because eventually they decided to bring Orome, and people with him were quite insistent. We should have them here. Of course we should have them here. They're freaking awesome. They would love it here. We would love it here. It was like, we want to bring... Can I keep them? Manve, can I keep them? I promise I will walk them every day and feed them and love them forever.
Right? Oh, I love them. I'll go, man.
And others, especially Mandos, who is the eternal who, while also being the stern and emotionless judge of the Valar, is also like the great pessimist, probably because he knows that shit is going to turn bad because of Melkor's corruption. Is like, no, we should leave them out there. If we bring them here, we're going to take them, whether we like it or not, just because we are by spiritual degree so much greater than them, we are going to bring them under our power, and there will never be a good thing coming from us. What am I looking for? Placing the children under our power. They will rebel against it. They will not like it. It will go wrong. This is not what we are supposed to do. Eru was very specific. We're supposed to be their teachers, their helpers, their guardians. We are not supposed to be their leaders, their rulers, or their parents. So eventually the decision is made that no, there is still Sauron and the others we don't really know, and the elves are very close to us, and we would like to have them here. So we are going to see if they want to come here. We're not going to order them over here. The Valar have not yet taken to ordering the elves around. They try to do that a bit later, which we will get to, and as Mandos correctly predicted, it went to hell in a handbasket. But as of yet, it was like, no, we'll give them an invite. They can come over for coffee and stay in our guest room if they like. Or they can stay back home. So Orome went there again and met up with the elves. He was probably primary voice to bring them there. This is one of those situations where, again, you can see the Valar acting in complete... The Valar are the good guys. They're acting in complete trust and faith to each other. Mandos doesn't let go of his concept that this is going to be a bad thing, but once Manwë, the legal and lawful High King of Arda of all times, have made his decision, we're going to stick with and try to do our best. Because that's what Daddy said we should do. So, Orome goes back, he talks to the elves, and he says, okay, here's the deal. This is what we are offering you. And the elves are like, I don't know if this is a good idea. You say there's a lot of light there from trees, but we have our stars here. How are we going to make do without our stars? And go halfway across the world? Walk halfway across the world? Sounds like a big trip, and there are dangerous things out there, and is it really worth it, and so on. So, eventually, they agreed to send 3 ambassadors to Valinor to see how things was and report back, after which they would then make their decision. These 3 ambassadors are not mentioned, like I said, in the later and earlier creation myth of the very first elves that Tolkien mentioned, but must have been of one of the very first generations of the elves to awaken. But they were specifically Yngvi, Finvi, and Ilvi. More specifically, all those 3 are going to be very important later, except actually Finvi, who's going to disappear out of the story. But those 3 went to Valinor, or Aman as the... Okay, Aman is the continent that Valinor is on. If I usually try to just use Valinor because of the country of the Valar, but if I start to use Aman, it's basically interchangeable. Basically. They go there and they see the trees and they see the great city of Valmar and they see, the light of the trees and they see the visage and the bodies, and they meet all of the Valar and all of the Ainur, and they are like, holy fucking shit, we are doing this so much. Screw everything else. No. Staying back there in those danky woods. Stars are nice. Stars are very nice. But staying in those danky woods, no, fuck that shit. We're going here. This is cool. This is hardcore. We're going here. So they are going back, and they are so eventually they are being taken back, and they are speaking very good for going there. But of course, in the end, it's the elves' own decision. And most of the elves, probably close to like 9/10 of the elves, decide to go to Valinor, but 1/10 chooses to stay behind because they love the starlight under the trees more than they love this potential for earthly paradise. And here I think I need to take a bio break, so maybe here's a good time to take a short break before we then... Next time, I think next stream we can start the journey, but until then we need to
we're on the brink of a whole bunch of information.
Yeah. So I think we need to stop here with the narrative, but after I have taken a quick bio break, and anyway, we might want to do the different tribes of the elves, the subspecies, the sub-races, the subdivisions, if you will. Such as it is, because it's going to be so important next time.
Right.
I almost think we should start off next time with the subtypes.
In that case, we should probably stop here just in general, unless you guys have something you want to discuss.
No, yeah. I also have something I need to do to get going. I'm a little bit behind on.
On that note,
I'm going to have to bail.
Okay. On that note, before we all disappear, this has been another Walk on the Geek Side with Skep and the Lovable Sage. So join us next week, same bat time,
Skep
same
is
bat
lovable
channel. as we delve into the elves and, who they are, what they are, and where they're going next week. So it's always at noon Central Standard Time on this channel every Sunday. So hope to see you guys next Sunday. Don't forget, at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time this afternoon, if you want to see me, the appointed mom of the internet, shit post, laugh, and argue with Mikado Avocado, that premiere is happening today, again at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. Or for those of you that like to delve into the military time, that's 1600 Central Standard Time. Hope to see you guys there in the chat while the premiere goes off. Until next time, stay geeky.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.